Why? Who's really behind this war? It's playing out in the Ukraine, but is it really between the Ukraine and Russia?
Well, that's a very good question because I think you've got to go back over 25 plus years to discover the roots of all of this. And while it was very obvious, certainly by the year 2000, that the continuous expansion of NATO towards the Russian border would be met with extreme concern, if not real hostility by the Russians. The Ukrainian issue is actually secondary, in my judgment, or even tertiary to the larger matter of people who seem to be uh, determined to destroy Russia. And that's a minority of these globalist leaders that we have both in Western Europe and at the moment in Washington. Globalist is only a partial description. We also have these people that call themselves neocons or neoconservatives. They're nothing. There's nothing conservative about them, and really, there's nothing new about them. They're internationalists with a global military hegemony agenda. And I think these people hijacked control of our foreign and defense policy really in the late 80s, early 90s. This business really got off the ground under Reagan. It was there with President Bush Sr., the first President Bush, but it really came to fruition under Clinton. And there are a couple of things that I don't think most Europeans understand. And that is, at first, most Americans are neither interested in nor pay attention to anything that happens beyond their borders. When I was at Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, I had a Spanish General Staff Officer who summed it up brilliantly. He said, Colonel McGregor, there's no such thing as the United States as a country. The United States is really a planet. And there's much truth in that statement. So an awful lot of what happens in our foreign and defense policy is of very little interest to the average American. And he takes on faith whatever his government tells him, which is a very bad habit, obviously. One would think that we were smarter, but we're not. And so if people tell us, well, there's a dangerous country here, country X, led by evil dictators or dictator, and it must be cleansed of dictatorship and converted to the utopia of liberal democracy, people sort of shrug their shoulders and say, all right, I guess that's necessary. And the lesson of the last 25, 30 years is if you not take 1,000 casualties in one day, which inevitably wakes up the American people to what's going on, you only take a few casualties every day or maybe a few hundred every month, you're probably going to be able to get away with whatever you want to do. So that's the key lesson. And part of that lesson is that if you can wage war by exploiting someone else's manpower, then that's even better, because that means that someone else is paying the price in blood, not Americans. Therefore, whatever you do with money, with equipment, with weapons, once again, evokes very little response from the American people. So part of this is a natural progression to a conflict with Russia, because Russia demonstrated remarkably to the entire world its ability to rapidly recover from total oblivion. If we go back to the 1990s, Russia was in just a horrible, horrible condition. And population was demoralized. Its armed forces were in ruins. And people in the West were quite happy. And large numbers of people from New York City and London, financial types, went to Russia with the goal of essentially stealing whatever they could get out of Russia, stripping it of resources, exploiting it, using it, buying up Russians, Russian politicians, oligarchs, and so forth, in order to gain access to the resources in Russia and strip them. All of this was ended by Vladimir Putin, former KGB agent. What a lot of people don't understand is that certainly during the Soviet era, the people who understood the most about the West and the most about the world beyond Russia's borders were KGB officers, because they were the select few that could actually travel. And Mr. Putin was an excellent example of that. He did actually spend time in the West. He actually quite pro-German. He speaks excellent German. He likes Germany and he likes the West. And that has been, frankly, a problem for him ever since he came to power in Russia, because there is this long-term strain in Russian thinking that the West is dangerous. The West is disruptive. It's destabilizing. But he's managed to survive all of that.